What up, YouTube? Or should I say, what up, my Dyslexic? I don't know if that's gonna stick, but I'm gonna try different names for our community throughout the, throughout these videos. So this video is about how to overcome your limiting beliefs as a dyslexic person. Now, you probably experienced this, but when I was growing up, I had a hard time in school, especially when I was younger than I am now. When I was like in middle school, that was the hardest for me because that's when I started really struggling with reading and writing and spelling and doing things slower than all the other kids in my class. You know, the things that came naturally to or what I thought came naturally to my classmates, I was really struggling with. And because I was struggling with those things, I started developing these like limiting beliefs in like my intelligence. And for a long time, even up until I went to college, and even after I graduated for a little bit, I had these like thoughts that really colored the way I processed information. After that, I've kind of figured out like how to deal with that, and this is what this video is about. I kind of want to give you some tools and understanding about how like your beliefs affect reality, and also how you can like reprogram your beliefs so you can have a better outcome after you figure it out and after you kind of deal with those type of things. So the first thing is our brain is kind of like a computer, and its main job is to take sensory input, like things you can see, smell, touch, hear, and taste, and run it through this machine in order to give it some kind of signal, right? So if I eat an apple, I'll bite into it, I'll look at it, and then I taste it, I'll get the sensation of like what it feels like in my mouth, and that will say you're eating an apple in my brain, and then that's what it'll do. Now, that's a very simple situation, but in more complicated situations, like if you see a movie, or if you read a poem, or if you talk to someone, then your brain has to do a bunch of calculations. And when your brain does lots of those calculations, it uses belief, like what you believe about this piece of art, how you feel about this person, your prior knowledge about this topic, as a way to help it process that information. Now, one of the things that I always talk about is our brain uses a lot of shortcuts in order to be more efficient, right? Like it wants to save energy, it uses a lot of energy. It's like one of the smaller organs in our bodies, but it uses about 20% of our total energy. So it's like an energy hog. So one of its like main functions is to figure out how to like reduce amount of calories it uses, and in order to do that, it uses a lot of shortcuts. And one of the shortcuts it uses is like your belief or your confidence in certain things. And if you have negative beliefs, if you develop these negative beliefs in yourself, what your brain does is it uses those shortcuts as a way to process whatever new information comes in. So if you're sitting in a classroom and you think you know the answer to a question, or you think you understand something, it'll try to run that data into your brain, but then it'll use that negative self-talk or negative self-belief to say, actually, we might not know about this. So instead of getting a true signal, you get a false signal, because the belief actually affects the data that your brain processes. The second thing I want to kind of talk to you guys about is, now that you kind of understand how a belief affects the brain, I kind of want to talk to you guys about how a belief or a story affects your subconscious. So our subconscious doesn't actually have the ability to know what's real and what's not real. So let's say there was something bad happened to you when you were a kid, like maybe you were called on in front of class and you had to read a book to your classmates, and you were struggling, and that was like one of the most humiliating things that had happened to you in your life. So your brain stores this story of you being embarrassed in front of the classroom when you had to read. So since it was such a traumatic event in your life and your brain really like wants to avoid that, what it'll do is it'll keep reminding you of that event. Like you'll just like keep replaying it in your head over and over again. Even when you're an adult, like you'll remember like, oh man, remember that time I had to read a book in front of class and I really struggled. I'm such a terrible like reader, and all these different things will start playing in your head. It'll be like a story that gets replayed over and over and over again. Now, but the thing that kind of sucks is that your brain and your subconscious won't know that that story that you're playing in your head is actually a memory. But your brain and your subconscious will think it's like a thing that's happening to you right now. So every time you replay this story in your head, there's like you can think of your brain as like having like a belief, right? Like true or false. And every time you play that story in your head, it'll put a stone on the side of like that scale that says I'm a bad reader. Every time you think of that story, it'll put another stone on your belief that you're a bad reader, or you're not smart, or you're not able to do things other people can't do. Even if you're experiencing like positive things, maybe you got through like a pretty difficult text. Well, that's going to be one stone against like all these stories that you told yourself over the years, right? So maybe you told this story to yourself like once a day for 10 years. You know, that's like 3,000 stories, 3,000 pieces of stone versus one piece of stone on the other side of that scale. So that belief that you are not a good reader is really, really heavy, and it's going to take a lot of work to get to kind of equal it out, and also you know, tip it to the other side. So that's how a belief can actually take reality and bend it towards the negative or towards the positive. Now, another thing that is important to think about this in terms of reading is the fact that, you know, these are stories, right? These stories that we tell ourselves counteract the reality of what's happening. So let's say that you've like been reading for like, you know, every day for like 5 years, even though you're like dyslexic and you're trying to get good. Well, even in the process of you doing this thing to help you become a better reader, you might be, you know, getting stuck at a certain point, and every time you get stuck, you're like retelling yourself this story like, hey, man, I must be a crappy reader because of that thing that happened to me 10 years ago when I was in, you know, 7th grade or whatever, right? So the only way to really flip this script and to change this belief and this like limiting belief in yourself is to cut this story out and replace it with a positive story. And one of the best ways, I'm gonna make another video on this, one of the best ways to replace a negative like self-belief with a positive self-belief is to create a story, like a real story that actually happened to you, like maybe a success, a win that you've gotten, and like start replaying that story instead. So now what you're doing is you're taking a rock from this side of the belief and you like keep constantly stacking it this way. Now before you were just like randomly telling this story that you were bad at reading, but now you can, you know, with like deliberate intention, you can start taking the stones and start stacking them on the other side. And eventually, and if you do this for a few weeks, you'll start actually, you know, defaulting to that positive story. You'll start doing things that reinforce positive behavior. So when you get stuck like on a hard, like a piece of text, or when you get stuck doing something you can't do with reading, you'll have a different story. It'll be a story that'll help you kind of overcome this challenge and get you to the other side. Yeah, so that's all I kind of wanted to share with you guys. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Bye.